Hello, everyone, and welcome to Growing Together, a gardening podcast with me, John Lamb, and Don Kinsler, a lifelong gardener and the North Dakota State University Extension horticulturist for Cass County. Don, how are you doing today?
I'm doing well. Our peonies are in full bloom. The iris are looking great.
Boy, aren't they?
It's a nice time of year.
It is. And, also, the weather is right now, this day that we're speaking. Yesterday, you really felt the shift. It was very, very warm. It was hot. And then all of a sudden, this kind of storm front moved through. Some of us got some rain. You said you really didn't get much rain.
Didn't get anything, yeah.
But it did cool down, and that makes it nice. And so this weekend is really supposed to be kind of cool. I'm looking forward to getting out and planting. So we're going to talk a little bit about planting on this show. How are things going in your yard? Are you all planted up?
Going well, but what is spring? And of course, no springs are identical ever. Yeah. I don't remember spring that started this late, this cool, and then turned hot.
Yes.
Like August hot.
Yeah.
Stretches of, I think we've
90s.
had, for Fargo, I think we've had our quota of 90-degree days already, I think, or close to it. And of course, during that hot spell, I wasn't in the mood to plant anything else because you just had to water, maintain, make sure things didn't get all parched and because things weren't just established enough to withstand that. So I spent a lot of time just kind of coaching my plants through this.
Yes,
and
making sure that they're watered because we weren't getting much precipitation.
No. And, I saw some good gardeners that showed me pictures. They even put lawn chairs to shade some of their plants.
That's a good idea.
That. Yeah. And I was tempted to hold a sun umbrella out on some of mine as well. And so now I am happy it's cooler, but I don't quite remember a spring that's quite been this dramatic of changes. So it's been a little interesting, but now I'm looking forward. I've got the energy again to do some planting. So it's going to be interesting talking about that. So other than wind and hot and the heat and stuff, the effect that it has on some of the flowers, things are looking pretty good. I can tell the tomatoes and some of that like the heat. Yes. Our melons like those hot spells. And so how are things looking around your yard?
One thing I wanted to talk before I forget about, you talked about the peonies were coming into bloom. And Sam, we've taken a lot of our peonies and brought them inside, cut up, and just use them for cut flowers. So we've got explosions of white and pink in our living room. Nice. It's really nice. We have a couple of ants. We didn't dunk them. We did dunk them in water before, make sure that they were submerged, but still some ants
that's
came
actually
with
a pretty good tip for bringing peonies in and dislodging most of the ants is in a bucket of water, just tipping that blossom tipping upside down and submerging it for a few seconds. I learned that from a garden club, and that works quite well.
Yeah.
You'd think it would make the flowers all plop apart, but no, it doesn't. You shake it off afterwards.
Peonies are oddly sturdy, aren't they?
They are. We had some wind. And some of my peonies, when I looked last night, the stems kinked about halfway down under the load of the heavy blossoms. And so, on my to-do list for next year, I'm going to invest in some of those peony the contraptions
cages
that they grow
grids.
Up through the grids that they grow up through to try to give a little better support because the branches the branches on the peony did kink about halfway up their length. They actually kinked. So now I think I'm going to have to cut those off at the kink after they're done blooming.
Yeah. One thing I would say with that is that's a good thing that you can usually find at yard sales, estate sales, garage sales.
Have you been trying those, the grid type thing?
We like them. We like them. Yeah, I do. I think they have been working. So
and you put those on as the peony is growing so that the shoots come right up through that grid system.
Yep. Sometimes you kind of need to coax them through because if it's a big enough peony, they may want to go off to the sides, grow out a little bit. But yeah, it's a good investment. And if you can get it cheap, it's something like a yard sale, garage sale, or just a thrift store. That's a good investment. But yeah, the rest of the garden, boy, you're seeing the tomatoes are really shooting up. We're already getting some flowers on our tomatoes.
Yeah.
Our potato plants, we're doing potatoes in buckets. Boy, those are going gangbusters. Our peas are climbing up the vines.
I've got to get ours. I've got to get ours on the trellis.
Yes,
they're thinking about wanting to vine up on something. So I need to get the trellises up. Thanks for the reminder. And pole beans. I'm doing pole beans because I've gotten tired of crawling around on my hands and knees picking string beans or getting a stiff back.
Yeah.
And so I'm doing the pole beans, which usually I use about a 5-foot fence at least and let them climb up because then I can pick the string beans at about chest height.
That's a good idea.
Yeah, but I got to get those supports up.
Yeah.
They're not
going up by themselves.
They aren't gonna set up their own support by themselves.
Well, and then this weekend is a great time that's what we're saying. This weekend is a great time for physical labor, and actually for the next week, it should be cool enough. It should not be too hot, shouldn't be too rainy. Good time to get out in the yard. So we're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about some of the tips for planting. But first, you've got a question from a listener.
Yes, Josh and Carrie wrote in and said, "Hi, my wife and I enjoy reading your articles and listening to your podcasts, particularly the Yard Draft podcast this year."
Well, that was a fun one.
That was
a good time with that.
That was great. We love the commentary and recommendations. On another note, we wanted to ask for your input on our Dakota pinnacle trees. We had 4 trees and now down to 2. One of the 2 is slowly dying back. We planted 2 in May 2023. Both of those have died. The other 2 were planted in 2022, been doing well until this spring. The strongest one is starting to have some branch die back. We're concerned it's starting the same path as the others. Any tips on how to ensure the continued success of these Dakota pinnacle birch? From Josh and Carrie. And thank you, Josh and Carrie, for sending the photos. Relatively young birch, planted just within the last, 3 or 4 years. And so nice white-trunked birch, Dakota pinnacle. It was developed at NDSU. But there are certain branches along that are turning brown. The leaves are all brown and crispy. And so when I take a look at that, I believe it's the bronze birch borer insect that has probably killed your birch, and they do affect and infest fairly young birch. Now, Dakota pinnacle birch is resistant to bronze birch borer, but that doesn't mean they're immune. And so the bronze birch borer has been just devastating to birch all across the region. And what happens is the bronze birch borer adult lays an egg on the trunk of the tree or injects an egg, and that egg turns into a larvae that then starts to tunnel through the trunk of the tree, and it disrupts the uptake of nutrients and water, and pretty soon you see a branch here, a branch there, and eventually the whole tree dies. And I've seen a lot of young Dakota pinnacle birch that get infected with this. So if you catch it early enough, and by catching early enough at the very earliest signs, and I think it's worth trying this method on yours, and that's a systemic insecticide. The systemic insecticide, meaning it's taken up by the roots and it goes internally throughout the tree, so that as the bronze birch borer larvae are working inside, then they're killed. They encounter the poison. And so the most commonly found one at garden centers is called BioAdvanced Tree and Shrub Systemic Insect Killer. So it's in a blue bottle with kind of a reddish label, BioAdvanced Systemic Tree and Shrub Insecticide. And so look for that, follow the directions. It's poured at the base of the tree, on the trunk at the base of the tree, and then goes internally into the root system. And so I believe bronze birch borer is the insect.
So that's something that you wouldn't necessarily start on the leaves. You're not going to see it really biting into the leaves or anything like that, and you're not going to see it on the surface. You're only going to see it once it's really started to do significant damage.
You got it. Yep. It's not a leaf feeder. It goes internally. The bronze birch borer goes internally into that trunk, and so it's working invisibly until you see the symptoms. You see branches starting to die back. And so it's working internally. The thing that I look for, if you look closely, there can be a little D-shaped exit hole that's smaller than pea size. And sometimes you can see a little kind of a hole there. But also, if you look closely at the trunk, you can see kind of a subtle raised area under the trunk, under the bark of the tree. And so the signs are subtle until you start seeing the brown crunchy. But this has affected birch trees all across the region, not just Dakota Pinnacle, but many other birch trees around the area.
This is something that we're looking at planting a birch tree. Is it worth it to do this preemptively, to
Definitely.
use this treatment even before you see anything?
Definitely.
I mean, we don't do product endorsement on this show, but is
Right.
this treatment that you were talking about, is it cost efficient enough to do it preemptively, even if
it is
before you see signs?
It's it's a liquid concentrate. It's not overly expensive. And I should mention, too, that as you're driving around communities and you see older established birch, it's fairly common to see a portion of it with dead branches. And it's usually the bronze birch borer. And eventually then the tree will probably die once it's affected like that. So, yes, preemptively treating with the product, the systemic insecticide is very, very wise. Also, river birch is less apt to get it. Excuse me. Like I say, no birch are immune, but the white-barked birch are more prone to get it. The river birch, which has more of a tannish, brownish bark, is less likely to be attacked by bronze birch borer. So if you're looking for a birch, river birch is a beautiful one.
And you've planted river birch,
yes,
haven't you? You've had good.
We've got a clump type river birch.
So those
and
people,
I also have a Dakota Pinnacle birch that I'm keeping my fingers crossed.
Okay.
I have not treated it preemptively, but I should because it's still healthy.
All right. Well, good information, and it's unfortunate that they already lost two. They already lost a couple, but hopefully now they can get out in advance and kind of save the other ones.
Yeah,
now.
what's nice, the reason Dakota Pinnacle was so widely planted was they tend to be kind of a pure middle type tree, good for screening. They don't become so widely branched, but kind of a row of those makes very good screening along a border.
And they grow relatively fast.
They do.
And straight.
They've got a good, beautiful trees. And again, it's not that we should not plant them, but I think it would be wise at planting to treat it with insecticide. Right. I think that would be a good idea. So thank you, Josh and Carrie. Great comments and great. I'm so happy that you enjoyed the draft.
Yeah,
the draft episode. We're going to do that again in the future.
Yeah, that was it's good. It's good to hear back from people about what
need to do that yearly.
Yeah, it's good to hear from people what particularly they liked, and it's what's great with Josh and Carrie is that they sent along a picture.
Yes.
That helps you
greatly.
You identify the problem. So if people have questions for you, what's the best way to reach you?
Send me an email, donald.kinsler, KINZLER, at ndsu.edu.
And send along pictures if you have something that you're worried about, something that's a problem. Send a variety of pictures. Maybe send a close-up of the affected area and send a picture from a couple steps back so that Don can look at the surrounding area and see what he can see there. Just kind of take in the environment of that.
Definitely. I'd also appreciate seeing some of your peony photos of some of the newer varieties that have stronger stems.
Yes.
I've got some of the older varieties, beautiful, fragrant, but some of them plop apart. Breeders have been busy, and some of the newer varieties have stronger stems. So I'd appreciate seeing some of those and hearing some of the specific cultivars of the peony varieties that you found are most sturdy.
Well, and for those people who are still looking to plant something in the garden, let's talk about planting. Let's talk about planting, and if we need to move something, but let's talk about planting today. So, what are your basic? If someone says they want to plant something, what are the basic things that you tell them? What are the most important things that you tell them?
Well, first of all, this time of year here in June, it's not too late. We've got plenty of planting time. In the old days, before the invention of the plastic nursery pot, things were sold bare root primarily, and they had to be kept kind of in chilly, refrigerated quonsets and stuff like that. And so you had a limited shelf life of those. They had to get in probably at least by the first part of June or middle of June. But the plastic nursery pot, things could be potted up, watered, and they stay in the nursery, the garden center, in good condition, really all summer long. So that gives us gardeners a wide selection and a wider opportunity to plant. And so I'm going to do plenty of planting yet. So the question is things too late to plant? No, we can keep going. I'd avoid the hottest days of summer, avoid those days, but plenty of good things. And of course, when we talk about trees, shrubs, perennials, planting, of course, it's always the right plant in the right place. Choosing, if it's a shade type plant, eyeing that up good, not trying to get a sunny type plant to grow in a shade type spot. Exactly. And then, of course, also when we talk about these things, checking the size, the mature size. And I've made this mistake so often, planting a shrub too close. My Trader mulberry, I planted that way too close to the house. I didn't realize it could get 35 feet tall and probably 20 feet wide. And so I have a yearly pruning job, but that's my own fault because I didn't research close enough. So, let's talk about trees.
Yeah, let's start with trees.
Yeah. So when you go to a garden center, what do you look for in a good tree? How do you pick out trees? Well, one of the first things is to look at the tree in its pot, see that it has a good straight trunk, and also look all around the trunk to make sure there are no cracks. Make sure there are no wounds. Sometimes in shipping, these trees get kind of shipped around a little bit or potted up, and there are damages that can happen to a trunk of a tree. And so make sure you're not starting out with a tree that already has a wound or a crack in it. And check to see preferably no broken branches on those. And make sure that the whole nursery block, the trees, shrubs, make sure that they look well watered. That there's not wilting going on. Sometimes the national chains, if they don't have someone specifically in charge of watering, sometimes things can be allowed to dry out more than they should. And so just, eye up the whole situation in whatever garden center you're at to get a feeling as, okay, have these been maintained? Have they been allowed to dry out? Are these trees, have they been stressed to a point? So I would definitely avoid buying a tree that has wilted leaves. And even if things were recently watered, they may have dried out for way too long and then been given some water. And so well cared for. And then look for the trunk flare. Now, that's the part where the trunk enters the soil in the pot. Preferably, you should be able to see that widened area, where the trunk goes into the soil. There should be a naturally widened out area called the trunk flare. And that, when you get this tree home and when we talk about planting, that trunk flare needs to be visible above ground. We've really learned this over the last dozen years or so, that when we do autopsy on trees that fail early, we found that many were planted too deeply. And when I say too deeply, it's sometimes only a matter of 2, 3, 4 inches too deep. And so we identify that widened trunk flare, and when we talk about planting, that needs to end up above soil level. Now, sometimes in a potted tree, that tree might have been planted too deeply in the pot. So, gently brush aside a little of that soil. I mean, use some finesse at the garden center, so
Right.
so you're not digging away in a potted tree. But in that pot, it might have been planted too deeply. So just gently kind of look down there, and when you get that tree home, you can take off that excess layer if it was too deep. So anyway, and look to make sure they're healthy leaves, that they haven't been chewed by insects or have any spotting, things like that. So those are all indications of a good, healthy tree. We don't know what's happening down the root system until they actually get that home and get ready to plant it.
Let's talk about planting the trees. What's the best? What are your tips? What are the best ways to go about planting a tree?
Yeah, so when we get that tree home, unless it was just watered at the garden center, water it well, because that'll do a couple of things. Maybe water it a few hours before you're ready to plant it. That will help hydrate the tree, get some moisture into the root system and up into the tree itself. But also, they come out of the pot much easier if it's well watered. They'll slide out easier. To get a tree out of a pot, you could cut the sides of the plastic pot, but many of them, if you just tilt them on the side, if they're well watered, the pot will slip right off. So then, before you do that, it's important to dig the planting hole. And a person should dig that planting hole at least twice as wide as the root system is. The reason for digging it twice as wide is because then you've kind of broken up that soil, and the roots will have an easier time kind of going outward. But it should only be dug as deeply as the root system.
So basically, as deeply as the pot.
As deeply as the pot is.
Yeah,
exactly. So what I do when I'm digging a hole for a tree, dig it and kind of gauge about how deep you want it to be. Again, the finished product, that widened flare on the trunk, should be visible above ground level. And then I'll the tree is still potted up. I'll set the pot down in the hole to gauge it. And if I haven't gone quite deep enough, take the potted tree out again and go a little deeper. Now, the reason for not disturbing the soil any deeper than what you need is if you disturb the soil too far underneath, that disturbed soil is going to settle, and the whole tree might sink down deeper than what is good for the tree. So that's why the recommendation is only dig as deep as you want that tree to be planted, and don't disturb any farther down. Now, most tree roots go outward. We kind of have this vision that they're going all the way down to China, that they have this big, deep root system. But most tree roots are in the upper 24 inches, 18 inches of soil. So that's why envision the root system going more outward than it will down. And so digging about twice as wide. So then we're ready to get that tree out of the pot. So I just kind of bend it on its side a little bit. Helps if you got a helper. Mm-hmm. And then pull the pot off and then take a look at the roots. Most trees that are in containers are going to have circling roots. They're going to be, because roots have nowhere else to go, so they just start growing around in a circle. And the tree's
probably been in that pot for a while.
For a while, exactly. And if we plant that tree as is, those roots are going to keep going in a circle, and eventually they're going to choke the tree like a boa constrictor. The trunk will try to expand, the roots will try to expand. Pretty soon, you've got them just strangling each other. And we've done lots of tree autopsies that have had short lives because the circling roots were left intact. So the ways to get rid of the circling roots, a couple of things. You can just grab them and pull and tease them apart. Try to get them to pull outward. And if that doesn't work, you can shave off about an inch all the way around the perimeter of the root ball and some off the bottom, and literally cut those roots. Another way some do is to cut it in kind of quadrants, cut right down through those roots in quarters with a good sharp knife. And also, when you're working with the tree, those fine root hairs and everything are very sensitive to drying out. So do this operation quickly. Maybe even have a watering can or something handy, and keep those roots hydrated, because they can expose more than half a minute or so. Some of those root hairs can start to die if exposed that fast, if exposed to too much air. And so it's also maybe a good idea to do this planting early morning or evening when things aren't quite so intense. So do this operation quickly, keep the roots hydrated. And then when you get the circling roots dealt with, then down into the planting hole. And it's nice to have the final situated so that there's a little bit of a saucer around the tree. So the ideal is a little bit of a saucer around the tree that's going to hold water. And then the flared part of the tree will be above ground level and visible. It won't be going down into the ground like a telephone pole, straight as a telephone pole. It'll have that little bit of a flare. You can also check for the top, what's called the flare root. That's the first main root coming off the trunk. That flare root should be right below soil surface. So we've got a little bit of a saucer that'll hold some water. We've got it backfilled. Also, tree roots need to go out into the native soil. And so it's not advised to amend that soil that you backfill with lots of good stuff. Otherwise, those roots might not want to leave that planting hole. So just whatever soil you dug out, fill it back in with that. Trees don't need the soil amended. And let's see, then after you get it backfilled, water well. That will get rid of any air pockets. It'll settle the soil well. And roots can't bridge air pockets, so that's one reason. And when we say water well, fill up that depression, that kind of saucer that you've created, fill that up really, really well. If you were going to measure it by the bucket, a newly planted tree, easily a couple of 5-gallon buckets, 10 gallons, poured around that tree, I think is needed to really firm that soil in well. And then mulch. We've created that kind of saucer of soil around so that it's going to hold, but then fill the whole works up. The 5-5-5 rule, I think, is great. A circle around the tree 5 foot wide and with mulch 5 inches thick, because it's going to settle. Probably it'll settle down to maybe 3 inches, and kept about 5 inches away from the trunk. And the mulch should be kind of in a donut shaped, not a volcano that's up against the tree trunk itself, but more of a donut shaped. And you've got that depression of soil underneath, and that'll all get filled with the mulch. But the water, when we water those in the future, that water will kind of stay in that depression, if you follow me. And so there we have a well-planted tree. If it looks like it might be a little top heavy or prone to wind, staking for just the first year is fine. A person can do 2 stakes, metal fence posts pounded in, 2 or 3 stakes around, and loosely fastened. When I say loosely, not tied so tightly that we're afraid the tree is going to run away, but tied so that it has a little bit of movement. That's important to develop the fibrous strength in the tree trunk.
Yeah, because if you tighten it too tight and you cut in through the bark of the tree, that's bad. That's a disaster.
Bad. Yeah, you got it. Yep. So cloth strips, some old pieces of rubber garden hose, and the wire fished through the garden hose, and then it's rubber garden hose that actually contacts. Even old strips of cloth, wire the ends of that so that it's just the cloth. There are also there are official tree staking kits that have kind of a nice trunk-friendly support around them too, so you're not gouging in with wire.
All right. Good to know. Let's take a quick little break. When we come back, let's talk about shrubs and perennials.
Local news affects your life. It gives you the confidence and clarity to make better decisions every day. You can support that with a digital subscription. Visit inforum.com/subscribe to take advantage of our introductory offer, just $6 for 6 months.
All right, we're back, and this week we're talking about if you still have to get out in the yard or garden, or you haven't done it yet because this has just been kind of a little bit of an odd season. Here are some tips for planting. We just talked about trees, but what about shrubs? Let's talk about the next big thing going down the
Yeah, so when we're at the garden center trying to choose between shrubs, of course, you select what type you want. And that's always fun. There are so many good shrubs, colorful types, flowering shrubs, evergreen shrubs. But so when you've chosen the one you want or the type you want, so when you're trying to decide which is a good shrub here that I want, okay, so things to compare. Look for dense, even branches as it's going into the ground so that the spot at which the shrub has entered the ground that has lots of good growth kind of from that. So rather than just kind of one or two weak branches, lots of good branches coming in. Nice green, healthy leaves without any yellowing. Check again to see if that whole block of nursery stock looks like it has been well cared for, well watered as needed. And boy, it's important to have a good label. And of course, most shrubs and trees are sold with a label, but check that the label for sure tells what the size, the height, and the width is, and also the hardiness zones. Of course, generally across our area, we're in zones 3 and 4. And the way that hardiness zone works is zone 1 is way up by the Arctic Circle. So zone 1, 2, 3 is across the northern tier of North Dakota, Minnesota. We're in about zone 4. So anything zone 4, 3, 2, 1, is generally good for most of us. And so then once we've found the shrub that looks like it's just beautiful and ideal, and I enjoy comparing all the different, if I'm wanting to look for a potentilla, I enjoy looking at the number of potentillas there and trying to find the best one. Sometimes they're all identical, but sometimes you can find one that just has a huskier, more branching on, and you just feel like, wow, this is getting a little more for my money than some of the others. So I enjoy kind of comparing them. The reason I say it's so important to look at that label and make sure it tells the height and the width, especially the width. Well, the height, you want it to be wherever is appropriate for your space. But with shrubbery, it is so easy to get them planted too closely, maybe too close to the house foundation, maybe too closely to each other. And so that width is so important on those. And so then when we get the shrub home and we're ready to plant, important to water it before you, just similar to trees. Get that shrub well hydrated in its pot, and also the pot then is going to come off a lot easier. So prepare the planting hole first, and again, about twice as wide as the current root ball is. Now, the depth of shrubs, the planting depth of tree is critical, very important for the long-term length of that tree. The planting depth of shrubs is less touchy. They can be planted a little deeper than they are in the pot. In fact, when you're trying to decide how deep the hole should be, again, don't disturb the soil too much underneath where the root ball is going to go, because then might settle too deeply. But in the final depth of the hole, when you've got the shrub finally situated, the backfilling soil should cover the existing root ball. If that root ball on a shrub, if that existing root ball as it was in the pot, if that's right at ground level, the moisture can all wick up out of that mix that it was in. And so it's fairly important to have that covered with your native soil. So slightly deeper than what it was in the pot is good for most shrubs. So when you dig, now shrubs, it's fine to amend the soil, with some peat moss. Shrubs don't have the extensive root system, most shrubs, that a tree does. A tree, a 30-foot eventual tall tree is going to have a root system from the trunk that's out 30 to 60 or more feet from the trunk. So there's no way you can amend that. But shrubs that don't have that extensive a root system, you can get them going with a little bit of amendment, especially organic matter. Hydrangeas love some extra peat moss worked in. It'll help hold moisture, gives them maybe a little bit of acidity to that too. And so it's perfectly fine to put compost and things in a shrub planting. So we've got that planted down in slightly deeper than what it was in the pot. And now when I say space, how far apart do you know for planting shrubs? Now, many of us aren't planting a whole row of the same thing.
Right.
So sometimes the tag will say how far apart to space. But that's if you're planting all the same thing. Okay, if it says space 2 feet apart, okay, fine, space that row all 2 feet apart. But what if you've got something, okay, this one, not that big, this shrub, not that big, it says space 2 feet. What if the next one is bigger and says space 5 feet? How do you space between those two? What I like to do is look at the tag for what it says is the mature width of that. Okay, so then I use that and envision that that's what the footprint needs to occupy. So the one that said space 2 feet, okay, if that's a 2 feet width, then I give it that 2 foot footprint. And then if the one said space 5 feet, then I envision, okay, that one's going to take a whole 5 foot footprint. So then I got the 2 foot shrub. I'm giving that, if you follow me, that's getting that footprint. The 5 foot one over there is going to get that 5 foot footprint. And so the space from the trunk to the trunk doesn't mean that much.
Yeah.
Okay, if you follow me.
Yep.
So, so I look at, in fact, for small plants, I'll oftentimes have cut cardboard circles that I kind of locate, because a common, and I've done this so often, things look so cute when they're small, and then I get them too crowded. And another thing that I've frequently made the mistake is not coming far enough out from the house foundation.
Yeah.
You know, I made that mistake when we originally planted our stuff 30 some years ago. And so when we moved our landscape from the house, in many places, I came out about 12 feet or so. Now, as things are developing, I could have come out a little farther. So instead of crowding the edging and everything up, 3 feet or so from the foundation, unless you're doing really miniature shrubs, in most cases, just give them plenty of space. Maybe more than what you envision. I've never heard anybody 20 years down the road say, man, I spaced this stuff way too far apart, or I came way too far out with the edging. Usually it's much the opposite.
And because we can be impatient as gardeners, we want things to look nice as soon as possible.
We want it full right now.
I'm the same way. The thing to do there is just plant annuals in between and fill it up. So don't worry about it. Think of the long term and think about that area. But in the meantime, just put in some annuals.
That's what annuals are for.
Yep.
Either right in the ground or some containers of annuals tucked around. You can have your cake and eat it too. And then, of course, right after planting, water well. Each shrub should probably have at least a 5-gallon bucket of water, maybe a little more, and then mulch around. And roses, of course, as we're talking about shrubs. Now, roses like really deep planting in our area. They tolerate deep planting well, and what that does, it gets that very sensitive crown. That's the area between the stems and the roots. It gets that crown down into a more protected, winter-protected area. So planting roses, so identify the crown, the area between the canes and the roots. That crown can be 4 to 5 inches, maybe even up to 6 inches deep below soil surface. And then that will give that crown protection. The roses tolerate that deep planting well, and it gives a very important measure of protection. If planted too shallowly, then they're much more prone to winter kill on those. So roses planted deeply, and of course roses love plenty of organic material added down in.
So another place to really amend the soil.
Exactly.
All right. Well, good. Let's take a quick little break. When we come back, let's talk about annuals, or perennials rather.
If you're loving this podcast, be sure to check out our full lineup. From news and local politics to sports and true crime, find your next great listen right now at inforum.com/podcasts. That's inforum.com/podcasts.
All right, we're back, and this week we're talking about planting. We talked about trees. We talked about shrubs. But let's talk about perennials. Where do you start with perennials? What are you looking for in a perennial?
Yeah, when you're at the garden center and you've decided you want to plant delphiniums, what do you look for when you're trying to pick among all the different delphinium pots there? Well, looking for a good, compact, sturdy growth rather than something that's tall and floppy. And I look for as many shoots coming from the base as possible. For example, hosta. If a potted hosta, if I see 3 nice shoots all coming out from the ground, immediately I'm thinking divisions.
Oh, okay.
Because if it's the type of perennial that sends out multiple divisions as hostas do, and many of the perennials do, you can, right when you get those home, you can immediately divide those.
Divide right
and
from
get
the pot.
three for the price of one. Okay. If you want a bigger plant right away, well then don't do that.
Right.
But if you're a little bit thrifty and it won't really set them back that much, but you get 3 for the price of 1. So I'm always on the lookout for a perennial that I can immediately divide as I'm planting it. And of course, look for those that have good, well cared for, watered, not wilting. Look around at the whole group of perennials. Are they being cared for? Are there lots of yellow leaves that look like things have wilted and then been watered a little too late? And bloom. Should we pick the perennial that has the best bloom?
Oh, it's tempting. They look so good.
Yes,
ready to go.
Ready to go. Oh, yeah. And but perennials, we're looking at the long term. If we want instant gratification, that's what annuals are more for. They're more for the kind of right now. Perennials are an investment into the future, and that flower stalk does take some energy for that plant. So I like the color on perennials because it kind of tells me what color shade it's going to be and gives me kind of a hint. But when I get those home and plant those, I cut that off. I cut that off because I want all the energy to go into establishing root system, sending out more shoots, more sprouts, more leafy type sprouts, and getting a better perennial in the long term. So I sacrifice some bloom, and I'm going for the long term on that. So. Will that perennial die if you don't cut off that blossom? No, it's not going to die. But longtime gardeners, they don't think twice about getting out the pruning shears and off with its bloom. And so then when you get the perennials home, now perennials don't have a huge root system going out, most perennials. They tend to stay in a fairly concise area, and so that gives us the chance to amend soil. When you look at the labels on perennials, most say they love a soil rich in organic matter. And so peat moss, compost, well-rotted, bagged manure, all of that can be worked into the planting area. I like to just shovel the area, mix in the stuff, and then dig the planting hole and make sure that when you backfill that you've got lots of good organic matter kind of mixed in with that. And most perennials, the crown where the leaves meet the roots, where stems meet the roots, the crown can be a little sensitive on perennials. So it could go just a hair deeper than maybe in the pot so that your soil is kind of covering up that potted soil so it doesn't wick up and out moisture. But that crown can be sensitive if it's too deeply. Peonies are a classic example. If you on a potted peony, and what's nice is, the traditional time for planting peonies, like just from roots or chunks or division, is in September around Labor Day. But a potted peony can be planted all summer long. So when you're planting a potted peony, just dig down a little bit to look for the eyes. Those are the buds from which the stems are growing. The uppermost bud or eye, and again, if they're in full leaf, there'll be shoots coming out of those. But that uppermost bud should only be about 1.5 inches, about that precise, about 1.5 inches below soil surface. If they're located too deep, they oftentimes will not bloom.
Okay.
And so the bottom line is we have to be a little sensitive on perennials so they don't get planted too deep, especially some overly sensitive type like the peonies. So after you've got them backfilled, water really, really well to settle it all in. And perennials like mulch. Many perennials will grow fine just in with bare soil around, but they really like mulch, and they really like the shredded wood mulch better than a rock mulch. Perennials will grow in with rock mulch around, but many gardeners have found that, if the rest of their landscape is rock, they'll find for the perennials, ornamental grasses, roses, other perennials, daylilies, that oftentimes you see in a rock mulch, they will pull that rock mulch away, farther away the better, and fill that area, that void, with a wood-type mulch instead. You've probably seen that too. Many gardeners, if they've got rock mulch on their landscape, they'll give it a little preferred mulch, the preferred mulch area around each of the perennials.
I understand that there's a value to rock mulch. I'm just gonna, I will be the downer on this one. You don't. You're a good guy. You're a nice guy. I understand that there's a value to rock mulch, especially in industrial settings, things like that. But for the home gardener, if you really want to do this, don't do rock mulch. I'm going to say don't do rock mulch. As somebody who worked on a landscaping crew and had to wheelbarrow, yes. I do not. I cringe every time I see rock mulch. And then you have to pull it up. Eventually, you'll have to pull it up, and it's a mess. And you look on Facebook Marketplace.
Weeds grow in rock mulch.
Weeds grow in rock mulch, and you see so many people who are like putting rocks in their driveway, saying like, "Come and take this."
Come and take.
And I know not every, but if you're listening to the show, you want to have a good garden. You're interested in this. You want to spend your time out there. Don't do rock mulch. And people can hate on me for that one. This is not a Don thing. This is a John thing. I'm against rock mulch.
Well, I'm smiling because if you come and visit, and you visit our place, do you see any rock mulch at our place?
No. People who were out there last summer for the garden tour.
There's not a bucket of rock mulch on our place. Rock is so heavy, especially in heavy clay soil. Okay, when we had our garden center, rock and plastic was the thing. There wasn't much wood mulch used. Okay, so everybody rock mulch. And then 25 years later, when we had it around our own house, 25, 30 years later, when we were moving our house, moving our landscape, and I peeled back a lot of that rock mulch and plastic, the heavy clay soil was just gooey and compacted. Yeah. Well, a bucket of rocks is heavy. And when that's over the soil, it squishes all the air out. Things will grow in it. But
and also rocks retain heat. That's right, heat. And that's not good for your plants.
Most roots don't like it that hot, and so any possible chance to not do. And of course, sometimes rock is looked at being more permanent. Well, the rocks themselves don't wither away, but as leaves get down in, some dirt blows
they're harder
in,
to clean.
Pretty soon in between rocks, there's a kind of a composty type stuff, and then the weed seeds germinate. And we've all seen commercial places that have rock mulch that didn't maintain, and there's weeds all over, grass growing between the rocks, and it looks pretty tough. And that's a hard thing to redo. Pulling up, and I've had people who have tried to wash rock, take it up and clean it and wash it. That's a difficult thing to do. Well, I can appreciate your lack of endorsement for rock.
For our area, we have winter, and if you have a rock garden by a walkway or by a driveway, and some of that rock, if your snowblower goes over rocks and you're throwing rocks or even mowing,
I hope it's aiming not towards the windows.
Exactly. That's potential damage. So
exactly.
If anybody asks me, I
appreciate your homily on rocks. I enjoy that.
Well, okay, this has been a lot of fun. This has been good and a lot of good tips. Good thing. Anything else that people should know?
I'm planting this weekend. I've got more perennials, and I've got some shrubs that I'm planting as well.
We have to replace a hydrangea, and we're going to put in another shrub. So we'll be doing some this weekend, and it just looks like a beautiful weekend. even if you don't have to plant, maybe this is a great weekend to do some weeding. Get out and it'll be cool. You can get out and do some weeding.
Volunteer trees. I've got volunteer trees poking up out of some of my perennials.
Cut them down.
I'm going to cut them out at ground level, give them a little squirt of 2,4-D on that. And yes, because I need to tackle some weeds.
And do that so that later in the day, you can sit outside and you can enjoy some of that. Maybe
I'm going to sip an iced tea.
Yes,
and enjoy.
you have a nice beverage. Maybe you grill out some food, or maybe you just sit there and you just enjoy maybe what could be a really beautiful summer day.
I'll do it.
All right. John, if people have any other questions for you, or if they want to hate on me for my dismissal of rocks, what's the best way to reach you?
Send an email, donald.kinsler, KINZLER, @ndsu.edu.
And if people have questions about something, or if they just want to show off what they're doing, send pictures.
That's great. And thank you, John, and thanks everyone for listening.